correct.
Then you can control the slides with this guy. This one should be set to go.
Okay.
When I have the PowerPoint.
Is it on?
No, it's on. I just don't.
Okay. I didn't see a green thing. Okay. Thank you. So if I go like this, it's the second one. What are you doing back there? I'm just kidding. Hello. Catch me when I fall. It will be. My husband's an Air Force grad. We go to a lot of them, actually. Have you ever been?
They're playing in Boulder. They're
Oh.
playing in Boulder on the 14th.
Oh, Boulder. Do you think they'll do, they might not do all the fun stuff they do down at the academy.
They're not going to do a fly.
They do flyovers and parachutes. Really fun to go see. Yeah, you should try this year, especially if the weather's nice, and go early so you can see all that fun stuff. That's true, especially on one side of the field where the sun's beating on you. Yeah. Do I have enough pieces? Do I have enough pieces of paper?
Welcome, everyone, to this study session on August 5th. Councilmember Wink is on her way, but we'll get started regardless. First agenda item tonight is our June financial report, and our Finance Administrative Services Director, Maria Sobota, is here to review. But before we do that, we should probably welcome our new city manager, Sean Lewis, to his first study session as actual manager here. So welcome. We'll have a little celebration later for those of you that are going to be here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. The agenda is packed full for the next hour, and I wanted to ask if you did want to review the slides for the financial package or spend a majority of the time talking about the budget. I can give a brief overview on the June financials and then go immediately into the budget, so it's at your pleasure. What would you like?
Council, are there any particular things you really want to spend time on the financial June? And if so, Councilmember?
We have some appropriations that you might want to go over that we're going to be talking about later. Might want to ask some questions now about some of that. Or, I mean, if we're over budget on some items, maybe you should go ahead and go over that as of where we're at in June.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that.
Let's. We could do that in the regular meeting too. We've got a very tight budget, or budget of time. But anybody else? I mean, it's an important piece that we should do one place or the other, I think. Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem.
I would actually like to go through an overview of the budget, and I do have a couple of questions that might be helpful
For the June.
For the financial report. Okay.
other
So if I could
Okay, go
ask
ahead.
Sam then to pull up presentation number 1. Okay. And while he's doing that, I just
Could
want...
I
Yes, certainly.
ask that
Oh, yes.
if there are any other departments that are over their budget, that you go over them as well, so that we have that, just have a heads up on that. Thanks.
Sure. Is there anything else? Okay, all right. So I did want to preface the conversation regarding the June 2019 monthly financial report by providing council with an update regarding the refinancing of the water bonds that you approved earlier in the summer. The transaction was closed this past Thursday, and the average coupon rates, or the interest rate, was 2.29, which was considerably better than what was presented earlier, just due to the rates in the bond market. So we did achieve even greater savings for the city. The annual savings after payment of legal and other fees associated with the transaction ended up being over $300,000 over the next 10 years. So quite a bit of savings. If you recall, we were talking anywhere from 200 to 225 as the savings, but it actually ended up being closer, well, over 300,000. Okay, so with that, I'd like to address Councilmember Barentine's question regarding what we'll be talking about tonight in the regular meeting. The supplemental appropriation that you'll be approving, or hopefully approving later tonight, relates to actually 2018. It is not related to 2019. We typically bring these requests forth after the audited financials are reported to you, which, if you recall, that was in late June. We were on the schedule to actually review that with you earlier in regular session, but it was bumped due to the heavy schedules that we have had throughout the summer, so it's coming to you tonight. The two areas that we're going to be talking about are human resources. There was a transfer of an employee from the finance department to human resources in 2018. So the finance department was actually below budget in 2018. HR was over budget, so we are required to come back and ask you to approve that supplemental appropriation, which we will do in the regular meeting tonight. The second item was the concrete utility budget or fund, and the reason that those funds actually were over budget is because of the timing of large projects. So those are the two items that will be in the ordinance that you'll be looking in tonight. And if there are no further questions for this session, maybe we can hold those for next, or I can get into 2019 if that would be okay. Yes? Okay. Okay. So let me just touch briefly on revenues, where we're at year to date. So as of June, with 50% of the fiscal year complete, our revenues are $24.8 million, which is 50.2% of budgeted revenue. It is above the 5-year average of 50.5%. But during the budget presentation, I am going to be talking about the fact that we expect the revenues to surpass our 2019 amended budget by approximately $1.5 million. The numbers that you're seeing reflected through June do not include the quarterly sales and use tax remittance. We expect that to come in very shortly. It's the quarterly remittance, and we do expect that that will drive higher numbers both in the second, third, and fourth quarters. And the expected increase is primarily in sales and use tax. So we expect to be on track with revenues this year and even exceeding our amended budget. And I had included in the memo some of the explanations for the larger amounts that are not currently meeting expectations, specifically the EMER fronts. I did talk about this a little bit last month. Nothing has changed regarding that, but we do expect that if the work is completed, that we will receive those revenues, so we don't expect any issues there. Overall, it's a good story from a revenue perspective for the year and going into the next fiscal year. So and that's important discussion because of the revenues that we're estimating for 2022, and we can talk a little bit more about that. We actually show this slide, our cumulative change in sales and use tax collected, so that we can see the trends that are occurring, and you can see we continue to be trending upwards as far as our cumulative change in sales and use tax. And these slides, the slides that I just ran through, explain what I've just talked about, the lower than expected. And I wanted to jump ahead to general fund expenditures because it seems like that's where the questions primarily were. We do have two departments that are trending slightly above where we would expect for this period of time, and it's the city manager area and also human resources. And as I communicated in the memo, we really believe these are timing overall. So there have been some decisions that have been made within those areas to fast forward some expenditures, but we do expect those to level out through the remainder of the year. And I think that this is an important slide too, because it shows our fund balance composition and where we expect to be with estimated revenues ahead of plan. We do expect that we will have a fund balance above policy, or reserve available above policy, of approximately $8.6 million at the end of 2019. So those are, to me, the critical highlights that I wanted to point out tonight regarding the June financials, and I guess at that, I'll leave it up to council to ask any questions.
Mayor Pro Tem.
The question I have is about the 2.219 million, that year-to-date activity from the unassigned fund balance. It shows that we've transferred it. I mean, 2018, the unassigned fund balance was 13.68, and then currently the 2019 estimate is going to be 12.06 or 12.066, but then it shows the 2,219,000. What did we do with that money?
During the, and I'm going to look for a head nod from Jenny, my budget director. This is the amount that was transferred as part of the budget appropriation into capital related to the building and other capital projects. So
Could you repeat that, because I don't think any.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
confirm
yeah,
before I
that's okay.
said it. Okay, so if you recall, during the budget period for 2019, City Council approved a $3.1 million transfer. It included projects such as the roof here in City Center and other projects, and so the 2.2 million is the current year activity of those transfers, so the work done to date on those projects.
Okay, and so we still anticipate that we will use the full 3.1 million, or we may not?
I have not specifically looked at the most recent project plan, but I can certainly provide you with that answer.
Okay, thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, when you show these in the activity column here, does that mean it's just an encumbered amount of money? Is it encumbered?
Is the question whether or not it's encumbered
The
or actually
2.2
spent?
Right.
Let me defer.
I guess that's a good question, that there is a difference between the two.
So I can also get that answer for
Okay.
you. I don't want to give you an incorrect answer,
Sure.
so I'll answer whether or not it's whether it's
If it's
encumbered
encumbered.
funds or actually
Okay.
spent expenditures as part of the answers to the 3.1.
Thank you. Any other questions for the June financials? Councilmember Berntine.
Sorry, forgot to put the quarter on. So the page for the sales and use tax, that the sales and use tax collected is increased by 5.06 million since June of 2015.
On a cumulative basis, that's correct.
Well, that's a relief, because we've not only not hit the cliff, but that looks like brick and mortar stores are doing us a lot better than we thought. That's a heck of an increase. So thanks for that information, I appreciate it.
Thanks. I see no other questions or comments, although I do want to say that the slide with the fun little blocks on it, the one after this,
Oh,
I actually kind of really like now,
I have control over the.
which I think I asked questions about it before. You like it too? Yeah, I think Member Sierra explained it better to me than what I had thought at first. I thought, I really kind of like this picture. So, thanks.
And this is good information for each of the districts. I don't go into this level of detail in this presentation, but if you ever
Right.
have a specific question, we do try to share with you what has happened within each area to show any changes also in the packet.
I have to say that I shared one of our packets for, I think, April or something, to another city in the southwest corner because they're trying to figure out how to get better financial information. They were shocked at how much you provide for us every month. They don't get that in even a quarter or half a year. So some poor soul in another city is working hard to figure out how to match you on this. But,
I think I already got the phone call.
oh gosh. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. Okay.
On
So,
the second item?
yes, so we'll pull up the budget presentation, please, Sam.
2020 budget. And
Yes.
again, our,
So I will preface this conversation while Sam is preparing us with the presentation. This is the 2020 proposed budget, and this is part one. We expect that we will come back next week to provide you with some additional information. The information that is included in your packet is categorized in higher levels to give you an idea of the types of, or the areas in which the directors have come forth and asked for additional funding. The detailed budget by line item will be available on OpenGov tomorrow. And every time I say budget, I do mean proposed budget, because we are looking for your input not only tonight, but also next week and throughout the next several weeks leading up to the September 6th public hearing. And we will certainly make adjustments into the budget that you would like to make. The department directors are planning on being here next week so that you would have an opportunity not only to hear from me tonight where they are looking to spend some additional dollars next year, but also to answer questions, detailed questions, after you've had an opportunity to look at each of the line items in OpenGov. I also I referenced in the memo that it might be challenging in some cases to look at line item budgets and look from last year or 2019 to the proposed budget. And I provided two examples where we have done organizational changes, such as the fire marshal, has been made a separate division. So you won't see it in the police division anymore. So if you're looking at totals, we're starting to work on those walkthroughs so that we're able to explain that. But it could be challenging when you're looking at line item by line item. And I would be happy to answer those questions if you have it after looking at OpenGov this week. So the majority of our conversation tonight will be based on where the priorities are, and we are looking for your feedback. I also wanted to mention that we'll be focusing primarily on the general fund. However, what we've included in the presentation are all of the funds as to where they currently stand as far as their proposed budget, so we are open to questions about that. We also have the capital budget, and we will, again, it's at a high level. We've reviewed a detailed capital budget with you earlier in the year. The team has looked at prioritizing that list. There are no new additional projects on the list. We've actually reduced the number to fit in with the available funding of $7.2 million next year. That list will also be available tomorrow for you to review. But again, you've had an opportunity to look at the list. It's just a condensed list in order to fit in with the funding. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. I also wanted to ask if we could hold off on questions until I get through this first phase, perhaps, but that would be at your pleasure, so I'll leave that up to you.
let me find out. Councilmember Berentine, is it something that could be handled later?
Clarification.
Okay, go ahead.
It is by charter for the creation or the changing of any departments or divisions, and the fire marshal is set by contract with the Denver Fire contract. So how did that get approved? Because I don't remember it coming to council.
Well, again, this is a proposed budget, and so if that's something that we need to have further discussions about, we certainly can.
It's my understanding then from what you've written that the fire marshal has already been changed, and I think that we need to take a look at both what the charter says and that contract before we go doing those kind of changes. So that was the clarification. That's all.
Great. And it's a financial discussion we're having tonight, and so those kind of organizational things we'll have to take up with the city manager and his wishes as we go forward. So go ahead and let's hear the 2020 budget.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was there something I missed?
I said, it's my understanding from what she said that it's already happened.
All right.
So I have a concern about that, so.
Yeah, let's go ahehe and continue to move forward.
Okay.
With the proposed budget.
It's in the proposed budget, but we can certainly talk about it further. Okay. So I've shown the slide for every presentation that we have had an opportunity to share with you, just to give us an idea of where we have been and where we are headed. We have provided to you the information that we're sharing with you tonight, primarily on May 11th. Again, some adjustments were made, some reductions were made from the original discussion that we had on May 11th, based on further conversations we've had with the department directors. But the information that we're sharing is not new information per se. It's information you've seen, and it was included in the appendix. However, it's been modified. And so hopefully we can walk through that, and there'll be some familiarity to the types of things that we're looking to have as priorities going forward into next year. So I mentioned that about the capital. That was reviewed by Planning and Zoning. We came to you on May 11th with that list. So I hate to be repetitive, but I just want to be clear that we've had a lot of opportunities to come forward and share the information with you. So I feel like today is a recap, and then as we move forward towards the public hearing, we're going to become a little bit more refined with your input. So I wanted to make sure that you knew what was coming forward. We are looking forward to bringing forth the proposed budget with your input on September 6th after we meet again next week in a study session with the department directors to answer any very specific questions you have regarding their budgets. We are looking towards having a public hearing on the 16th and then a final workshop to finalize any changes by the 23rd, with the expectation that we could move forward into a first and second reading at the beginning of October, so that we do hit the deadline of having the budget approved no later than preferably by October 21st. But if there are questions and we have to go into November like we did last year, that would be not ideal, but we could do it because we do need to have it approved by 30 days before the end of the fiscal year. So we had introduced Jane Q. Public, and I wanted to bring this slide back because I think before we start talking about the numbers, it's important to remember the types of services that the city does provide. And, you know, we have obviously looked into a lot of the contracts that we're currently working with, and, you know, we do look to provide the best service possible with efficiency and effectiveness. And I think it's important to understand that there is a price tag that is associated with all of the services that are provided to our citizens, including our fire services and our police department, of course, and our recreation. So a lot of the key themes that you'll hear us talk about tonight are related to the levels of services that we want to provide and continue to provide, not only at the level that we're providing them today, but at an even higher level. With all of this, you know, one of the things that we've shown you before is that over the past 10 years, with a revenue compounding annual growth rate of 2.7%, the city has managed with fiscal responsibility, keeping expenditures during the same time period at approximately 1.3%, again, on a compounded annual growth rate. When you look at what the consumer price index is for the Denver, Aurora, and Lakewood area of 2.2, the city has actually stayed below that amount. And I think that this is important as we move forward in talking about not only the general fund requests we have, but our entire budget in totality, even with the enterprises, and all of the conversations that we've had over the past several months, you know, regarding the infrastructure needs and our maintenance needs and our ongoing need to build a capital reserve. I wanted to talk about this because even with the compounded annual growth rate of 1.7%, you can see that what we are challenged with in order to attract and retain employees in offering competitive compensation to not only retain but also attract levels of talent, we also have to offer competitive benefits. And that is one of the key themes that you'll hear as to one of the challenges that we're facing when we built this budget. We recently, and you will hear tonight, we have worked on the Englewood Employee Association contract. And as part of that, and again, you'll be hearing more about that later tonight and being asked to approve, the wage increase that is included.
And move it up just a little bit. Apparently, it's set at a little different range. So unless you
Is
get
that
really
better?
close, yeah, I think so. They can hear it, I guess, on the other side. But I just
Okay.
want to make sure it's loud enough for everybody to
Okay.
hear.
I just wanted to make sure that you didn't hear every sigh, too. Sometimes that happens. The contract includes a 3.5% increase, and that was for 2020, 2022. So the numbers we're reviewing tonight includes that assumption. We also have the Englewood Police Benefits Associated negotiated salary wage increase that is already negotiated, and in 2020, 3.5%. So that is included in the budget numbers you'll see tonight. And the Colorado State salary wage increase for each year, 2019 and 2020, it was 3%, and it is going to be in 2020, 3%. So the numbers for non-union salaries also included in this budget are increased by 3%, okay? However, that is compared to Colorado Economic Indicators wage and salary income percent changes in the public and private sectors at even a higher rate. So that's a challenge for the city. So even putting that into the budget, I just ask you to keep in mind that the average increases outside of the city of Englewood are definitely more competitive and higher. And that does play a part in who we're able to retain and who we're able to attract into critical positions within the city. Okay? We've mentioned this before. In all the conversations we've had over the past year regarding the budget and contracts that you're signing, we've talked about improving infrastructure. We've talked about the needs to fix alleys and maintain streets. We want to make sure that we ensure a well-planned development or redevelopment. We've had Dan Poremba and Brad talking about the city center here. We definitely have heard a request for more support in the crisis intervention area as well. Building on technology efficiencies, offering excellent document management for ease of core requests and other requests that we get from citizens to provide them with information, and you with information. Also heard we need parks and recreation upgrades. And we're also talking about trash hauler options. So all of these things were part of the discussions that we had as we were putting together the 2020 proposed budget. This is where we currently stand. The city really truly lacks revenue diversification. The orange, although I don't have the numbers posted here, the orange slice of the pie represents the dependency that we have on sales and use tax revenue. It's very large. The blue that is right next to this orange slice of pie represents our property tax piece. So with 60% of the general fund revenue being sales and use tax, and the fact that our city has not designated a property tax mill levy in over 25 years, it really has made it difficult for us to develop a long-term plan to fund ongoing programs and services that the citizens can afford. The dependency, you know, while the economy is good, this dependency on the sales and use tax really does rely heavily on a very robust retail market, and that can fluctuate based on the economy. So while it's going in an upward trend now, to Councilmember Barentine's point, you know, when I was reviewing June, that is a significant dependency on one source of revenue. So as a result, our property taxes, this is specifically related to property taxes and our fire services and our police department, the services that we can provide currently with just property tax revenue carries us through March 9th. The rest of the year, our police and our fire services are paid for out of sales and use taxes as well. So this is just, you know, an example of how property taxes support these services, but how we are dependent on sales and use tax. I'd like to shift gears now and talk specifically about our 2020 general fund and the balancing act that we currently have. And I'm just going to catch up with my slides to make sure I'm not missing any key points. Okay. So we've talked about property taxes and where they stand, and sales and use tax and our revenues, licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures, and other revenues and fees. I think in the previous conversations we've had throughout the year, we've talked about the relative size of these other funds. And what's happening is with even those funds and our increases in sales and use tax, we have a lot of needs. And when we are proposing our 2020 general fund proposed budget, our proposed sources are 52.6 million and our proposed uses are 54.2 million. And I want to stop and just talk about the items that are included on the uses side. The circles don't have any relevance to the size of the request. I just wanted to point that out, okay? I'm going to be talking about the numbers that for each of those in the next several slides. I also wanted to let you know that these are not programs per se. They're priorities, and finance and the department directors actually assigned names to categories of funds to share with you tonight. And I'm going to be giving you a breakdown of what's included in these specific funds as we move forward, but they weren't meant to be programs or necessarily a priority-based budget per se, like they were last year when we were going through it. These are just categories of costs. So I'd like to talk about the increase. So what I was just sharing with you was our sources and uses, and you can see that we're not balanced. However, I think a more relevant number for us to have discussion on is actually our 2020 proposed general fund investment increases. It's actually $4.5 million from the 2019 amended budget to the 2020 proposed budget. And I hope that that makes sense. And if it doesn't, we can revisit it maybe during question and answer. But this is really the increase from the 2000 amended expenditure budget or uses of funds to the 2020 budget, okay? I'd like to spend a majority of the time tonight talking about what is included in each of these investment categories that I just talked about, so that we can have some dialogue when I complete this portion of the presentation. So in one of those coins that was shown on the balancing tray, we talked about retaining and attracting employees. Of the $4.5 million, approximately $1.6 million could be categorized as retaining and attracting employees. The major components of this are salaries. So I mentioned earlier that we were increasing salaries, or what we've proposed in the budget is a 3% increase for non-union, 3.5%. The impact of that relative to the 1.6 million is $900,000, okay? We also have an increase in our part-time minimum wage salaries. The impact of that is $300,000. We also have proposed new employees in our budget. We talked about several FTEs when we met on May 11th. What is actually included in this particular version of a proposed budget is 6.5 FTEs, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more.
Mayor, can I get a clarification, please?
Certainly.
Yes, quick clarification.
You're giving us numbers. I'm breaking down this 1.6 million. Did I miss it in here? Where's that listed here?
I'm sharing that with you tonight.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so those are the major components. This is important too. So in the $4.5 million, approximately $1 million is benefits. So the benefits is not included in the retain and attract. The reason I extracted it is because we currently have a quote of a 26% increase in our medical benefit cost. That's reflected in this number. However, I did share in the memo that staff is actively working to negotiate this not only with our current provider but other providers, and we are very hopeful that we can limit the impact of the budget going forward. So we expect that this number could decrease significantly. The issue that we have is that the providers need 2 quarters of claim data in order to actually provide us with a contract, a firm contract rate. We expect that we will have those numbers by the end of August, so prior to the public hearing, we will definitely be updating all of the numbers with what we believe we would be moving forward with. And at the same time that you are looking at the proposed budget and looking at that, we would be bringing forth the contract with the provider for you also to approve at that time. So I won't really have an idea of where this number actually stands for the next several weeks. But that is the impact as it currently stands in the proposed budget that I'm reviewing with you tonight, and that will be included in the line item budget that you'll see tomorrow, and the public will see tomorrow. Levels of service. This is related to, and actually, again, it's a category of cost. The FTE increases that I was talking about, there are 6 positions. There are 3 public works positions. There is a police position and a help desk position. And then also a citizens response. There are 3 part-time positions. The information related to the positions, if you recall, we reviewed it on May 11th with you, and we had some discussion about those positions. And in the deck that you were provided, we've indicated if there was a change or a replacement in red. So you are able to see which FTEs the department directors have removed from their original request list to what is included in the current budget. Effective partnerships. So there are a couple of things that increased in costs here directly related to conversations that we've had with City Council in the past. The first is emergency management. That is currently budgeted at $113,000. The crisis intervention team, which we also had conversation about, at $104,000. And in our fire contract for our fire services as provided by Denver, the contract allows for 3% increase in the fee, and that's approximately $177,000. So those 3 items that I just mentioned total the $460,000 in the partnerships for excellence, as we call it, as a category of costs. Well-planned community and regulatory costs. So when looking at the budget and talking with all of the departments, our property and liability insurance is actually increasing close to $125,000. That's currently included in this portion of the budget. We also have talked about redevelopment of the city center, and that's approximately $125,000. The partnership to increase with RTD to increase the trolley services. That's approximately $65,000 of this increase. Title 16, so work to look at our landowner or land development code is approximately $50,000 of this total. And there also are court mandated fees that I know that they were shared with you on May 11th. That is in the budget for approximately $25,000. So the items that I just mentioned make up a majority of the well-planned community and regulatory section. Vibrant community, this is actually related to the Broadway flower pot and medians. It's approximately $35,000. This used to be funded by the bid, but and then it was capital, but it has been moved to operating expense. So that's a piece of this. Community outreach and communications. The communications budget, Chris is our new Director for Communications, or Communications Manager, excuse me, and he's increased his communications budget by $20,000. But also included in this, as we move forward with our request to move forward with a bond, there is significant community outreach associated with that, and so there are consulting fees of approximately $90,000 also included in this proposed budget for additional community outreach as we move towards looking at a bond. And the last piece, technology enhancements. The largest item in here is a new human resources system that you will be hearing more about next week. Maria Gonzalez is leading the charge to look at condensing the variety of systems that we have within the, to handle our HR and personnel requirements as far as systems and data gathering and payroll and things of that nature, and the majority of this technology enhancement is related to that. There will be cost savings that is identified as it's put forth. The increase right now is included, and we are still in the process of identifying those cost savings and expect to bring that forth in that request. The other piece of the increase is related to the Comcast agreement that was brought forth from IT. However, the majority of that was offset through efficiencies in cell phone usage, and so the net increase is about 50,000 of that total 300. So the HR system is approximately 250, and the remainder of that is related to specifics in IT. So that is the majority of the investment increases. The total of all of these is the 4.5 million. And certainly during the question and answer, I can go back and we can talk a little bit more about the details. And I know that you're looking at time. If I could maybe go through these 5 more minutes and then we'll open it up for questions. Will that work? Okay. So what I've just reviewed with you, the $4.5 million is related to the general fund, but we can't forget the other significant city needs that we have been talking about the past several months related to the enterprise funds and the capital needs within the general fund. And I put this up just as a reminder that even though we're not talking about it specifically tonight, as we're moving forward and we're talking about increases to specific taxes and fees, that we keep in mind that we have these other significant needs that we've been talking about. So going back to just the general fund and the operations and program services sustainability, we do have a shortfall versus the sources of funds next year and the uses. Now, I'm not talking about the $4.5 million gap now. I'm talking solely, I think it's a $1.6 million gap between our proposed sources next year and our uses. We could, in the short term, use the general fund's balance in excess of the reserve policy to fill the revenue and expenditure gap. But I think as a city, we really need to seek a long-term solution and consider other tax increases, such as the property tax. And I had mentioned that our 5.88 mils has not been increased for over 25 years. And our current rate is below surrounding municipalities, and that information was shared in the appendix. And that is something that we actually did talk about several months ago as well. We also could talk about other taxes, such as occupational privilege tax, or consider other fees. I think, it goes without saying, when these budgets were being put together by the department directors, there was a lot of discussions regarding efficiencies and effectiveness within their own budgets to maintain levels of service. It's important to note that costs have continued to increase too. I mean, not only are our salaries and our benefit rates increases, so is that happening to our vendors. And so those costs are passed along to us. So the directors have looked at those efficiencies, and certainly we could continue to do that. But I want to make sure that you understand that the budget that's being put forth is not just additive, it's not incremental per se. Yes, these are incremental costs, but when the directors went through the budgets, they were looking at other efficiencies as well. And like, for instance, in IT, I mentioned ones that Director Brockelander looked at, and so she had a lower increase than she may have had if she didn't seek those efficiencies. So there was that level of diligence that went into the budget, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. We also, so back to the sorts of things that we have been talking about and can consider as we move forward in further budget discussions. A dedicated sales and use tax increase, of course, as I mentioned before, this would be dependent upon a positive retail environment. And I had mentioned, several months ago that even if we did increase sales tax 10%, which would put us above surrounding municipalities, quite frankly, and that information is also in the appendix, it would generate approximately $3 million. But again, that would be dependent upon sustaining the level of business that we have currently in the city, right? That's the dependency. And we have talked about other debt financing options as it relates not only to our enterprises, but also to our general fund. And the things that we could do, we could dedicate a public improvement fund levy up to 2 mils for capital projects. An increase of 2 mils generates approximately $1.4 million, and the cost to citizens annually be $58. And we can look at general obligation bonds, similar to the ones that we've done in the past, that would be supported by a dedicated property tax increase. The cost, again, would be dependent upon amounts borrowed. And we would need to consider, obviously, the near-term debt expiration and current debt levels as well. We do have debt expiring in 2023, albeit the debt service on those amounts is not great. And all of these things, I think, have to be looked at collectively when we're talking about the infrastructure needs that we have. But again, these are just to bring forth the ideas that we could have to fund gaps. So I'll take a break here. There are more slides that are included in the deck that are a refresh of the information that we shared on May 11th, actually even further back. I think we talked about it in March. And I want to mention as well that the information that we shared earlier on revenues for 2020, the number that I shared with you as far as our sources of funds, has not changed since March. Our estimate was the same. And likewise with our estimate for 2019. So we feel very comfortable with those numbers moving forward as we have further discussion regarding the budget.
Great, thank you, Director Sobota. I wanted to say to start out, and council members, put your lights on if you want to start to ask questions, that we asked you to be very honest with this. We asked you to bring forward a number of options for further revenue opportunities in the future. And I don't think I've seen anything so thorough in the 10 years that I've been on council, so I thank you for the work that you put into this. It's never fun to come forward and be the one to suggest different ways we would have to go after more money. And nobody's wanted to do that in the past, but now it's time to have a really clear, deeper conversation again about this. So I appreciate the work that you've done in this. Councilmember Sierra, starting us off.
So just a quick clarification on the $4.5 million 2020 general fund increase. So that slide, so the retain and attract, you spoke about the 6.5 FTEs, but then again spoke about those 6.5 FTEs within the level of service. So was there a double dip there, or?
I realized that I had said that. No, there isn't a double dip. They are truly over in the levels of service. So the other piece is part of market survey adjustments for current employees that are on board, or if a current FTE that we have this year, it's determined that a different level of position, if that position is vacated and the position requires a different level of pay based on market survey, there's also that. And I have yet to quantify that. I would actually have to go position by position and see everything for 400 people, 200 people, we'd leave the seasonals out. I would have to go person by person to see. So you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. I wish I remembered everything about the budget. I don't, but I do recall, Director Sobota, a figure around 80%-ish of our full-time employees, right, with that portion of the budget. In your discussion tonight, can you tell me what % of our employee base is actually part-time?
As far as a dollar amount is what you're looking for?
No, just a round number percentage of
I'm
the
going to
total.
move
Is that an odd
forward.
question?
No, it's not an odd question. I'm just moving ahead here to our general fund. So I don't have it split out. I think this
Sure.
is what you were referring to,
Yeah.
where we actually talked about the variable
back-
cost being
Mhm.
30.9 and the remainder being the fixed cost relative to the union employees and other commitments that we've made. So this shows a total of other exempt, part-time, and seasonal staffing. I can refer to Jenny to see if she knows that off the top of her head. But
Okay, thank you. I'd love to know. Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. I also appreciate the thoroughness of all the information in here. It is also helpful to see that we haven't increased our property taxes over 25 years, and that, we're kind of paying for that now, that, we haven't increased it at all. My question is, if we created a dedicated public improvement mill, what do we call it? Mill levy? improvement fund levy. Is there any projects that would be off the table in terms of, that we could get done? Or, so I guess my question is, if we added a property tax increase for general public improvements, could it be used for any type of public improvements, or would we have to be really clear on, we would do these specific projects over this duration of time?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and explain that. So I know why you're asking the question, because with bonding, we've talked about the fact that we would have to identify those projects in order to support it going into the vote. I would say the same would apply for this. I can look at Jenny. When it's a dedicated, I would say you could dedicate it, and it would, I think that when you're talking about a tax increase that has to go to a vote, that you would want to identify what those are.
The specific projects,
Yeah.
okay. And then with that, is there also a specific duration of time in which those projects need to be completed?
That I am not certain,
Okay,
but I will look.
okay.
Okay,
That's
so
okay.
that's a question that we will get answered.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Mayor Pro Tem Russell?
Can you tell me, in the 25 years that we have not had a mill levy increase, have the amount of taxes that are being paid to the city increased? Have the property taxes that the city is getting, has it increased in the 25 years that we haven't raised the mill levy?
It is my understanding that the mill levy that is assigned directly to the city that has not increased has generated the same amount of revenue for the city. I understand your question, because you're thinking if property values increase, have we
I'm
achieved
paying a lot more than I did 25 years ago.
So we're talking specifically about the money that comes to the city to support the general fund. We are not talking about property taxes that are paid to support county-related expenditures. So there is a difference.
And schools, right?
And schools. So those are separate from monies that the city receives. So yes, your property taxes have gone up for things that have been voted on related to the county and the schools, as the mayor mentioned, but the city does not receive a portion of it to afford any of the things that we've put forward. They're
Okay,
separate.
all right, I appreciate that. Then I have another question, because I asked earlier if the city would consider where we could cut expenses. Are there places where you actually cut expenses from, or projected what we're going to spend, cut back?
So I think I can answer that with a couple of examples, but I also would like to ask you to ask that question next week of the department directors, because they are intimately familiar with the efficiencies that they were able to achieve. I mentioned one tonight in the IT area where there was an increase in cost in the Comcast fee of $200,000, but because cell phones and other things within the IT budget were reduced, the increase overall that the IT department experienced in that particular line item was $57,000. That's one example. I know within the finance area, yes, my expenses are going up year over year, but not at the rate of even the salary increase, because I've decided that I would not replace the deputy position that was currently in the 2019 budget, so that was a conscious decision. There are also, I had one on the tip of my tongue and I can't remember it right now. There was the effort on behalf of the department directors, and I guess I'll take this opportunity to say that this presentation was not just me putting it together, and so thank you for saying something, Mayor Olson, but really it was a collective effort by the directors, and certainly with the direction of interim city manager Dorothy Hargrove, so I wanted to mention that. But as we went through the budget, we did budgets, everybody was looking for efficiencies as well. The issue that we have with these increases is that we are responding to requests for additional programs and services, and so we have to reflect that in this proposed budget so that we have an opportunity to talk about the things that we really want you know, and things that we are maybe nice to haves that maybe we can't afford next year. And that's where we're really looking for city council's guidance so that, you know, we can move forward with a budget that we can all, you know, live with and really agree takes the city forward. And I guess that's the best way I can describe it. But we will work on, I'll talk to the directors actually this week about pulling together for next week and some other areas of efficiencies that they've worked through in order to present the budgets that they have for you tonight.
Okay, and then I just have one more question and then just a comment. How much of the general fund budget pays for salary? What percentage?
I have that slide. Can I find it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see. I should have it
46%, looks like
going forward. So let me go forward a
And
little bit further.
While she's doing that, Mayor Pro Tem, if you wouldn't mind, there are two other people that want to ask questions. Could you hold your comment till they get their questions asked?
That'll be fine.
Thank you.
I went back all the way to the beginning. Bear with me. Bear with me, please.
It's in there, I saw
It
it.
Slide
is.
23.
Thank you. It's the issue with animation, right? It takes you a little bit longer.
Well, and 24, yeah.
Okay, not the slide I was necessarily looking for, sorry. Here it is. Well, actually, this is the percentage. So this gives you an idea of the total. And then let me,
There should
you
be
know what, you're
another
right.
one.
You're right.
That one.
There we go.
Was it all on?
There we go. So if you add those together, right, it's 60% of our total general fund.
60%?
60%, 46%, and 14%.
Thank you.
And I think this is, again, the slides that I included, what is important to note that, you know, of that, right, the fixed costs, just for the union piece, right, of this 23 million, I actually will get that number for you because that would be the piece that we don't necessarily have control over within the once approved, right, under contract. We would not have flexibility moving forward unless if we didn't have funds to appropriate for those amounts. So we have to keep that in mind as well.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Berentine, and then Member Cuesta.
I'll make it quick so that Councilmember Cuesta can go ahead. The percent of a formula, when the base increases and our property tax valuations have increased, so the city has to be collecting more in property tax because the formula didn't change. So if we could get a little bit more information on that. The information availability is going to be on there tomorrow, you said? So all of the things that you did kind of anecdotally that weren't part of this are going to be available on that tomorrow?
A point of clarification, on OpenGov, it will be the line item detail and the capital requests.
Some of it is also in these slides. In the,
I mean, the level of detail isn't, I mean, there's a lot of detail missing here, but that detail is going to be in the OpenGov tomorrow.
I can ask a question. If you would like it to be, I can provide it.
You just said a line item was going to be
A
available.
line item will be presented, but I was not presenting a line item tonight.
Oh, no, I understand.
I was presenting categories of costs.
And I didn't think,
Oh.
I agree, that's fine.
Yeah.
But my only question is it going to be available on OpenGov tomorrow?
The line item budget
Thank
will
you.
be available tomorrow.
And then if you could also, the next presentation, go ahead and provide us information on these additional programs and services that are being requested, I would appreciate it. That's all. I'll defer to Council.
So if I could
ahead.
clarify, so what I have done on the slide that we were talking about is take the information that's prepared in the appendix and categorize it. So it is included in the packet. It's just a matter of, I've added it up for all of the departments, and it equals the totals. So it's looking at it from a cross-sectional view, right? The line item budget is not going to provide you with the context that I've provided you with tonight regarding the categories of costs. It's impossible to do that unless if you wanted to add up every department. This was my attempt to be very transparent about the categories of costs that have increased year over year, and certainly we're going to be having more granular conversations even going into next week.
Thank you. And Councilmember Cuesta?
You bet, thank you. I'll make it brief as well. Slide 7 is where you pointed out that the general fund revenue is made up 60% of sales and use tax, and then there's the blue slide accounting for property tax, and that one, it does not have a number on it. I'd put it at 10 to 15%. Yeah, it's the pie piece, excuse me.
I probably have that, actually. Bear with me.
And I can dive into the question here, too. You didn't explicitly state this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like I was hearing you advising caution on it having it such a level and being dependent on it being such a level. Is there a best practice of what municipalities would generally like to see that at, if that would be higher than might be prudent for a city?
No, I don't have that information. It's something that I could gather, though.
And one more note. Not too long ago, I inquired about the staffing levels as well, and at least for 2018, there were 618 staff members, 244 were seasonal, so it was 39% were seasonal. I'm not sure if that impacts for 2019, probably doesn't, but they gave me a snapshot. Thank you, Director.
If I could answer the previous question.
Go
So
ahead.
the property tax piece, approximately 4.1 million is property tax, and so that is less than 10%.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Great. Thank you. This is a great big overview of the whole thing with the different categories. I haven't seen it kind of cross, sort of populated like that. It's helpful. It's a different way to look at it. So tomorrow, things will be up on OpenGov, actually the line item. And then next week, we're going department by department. Each department director will be here. Will they each present?
I think that's, I don't know that we will necessarily have the time. We still need to work on the agenda for that discussion, and I know we have other topics to discuss that night as well. We are currently updating the slides that are in the back of the deck to be reflective of what we're showing here. And I think it depends on the questions that they receive. They will be here to answer questions. I don't know that they're going to present what they did on May 11th. I think it could be repetitive.
Okay.
But we'll have more conversation about that.
Would you want questions by email from us of things that,
I absolutely think that that would help us frame the discussion. It would be
Okay.
helpful considering that we have an hour, because we really do need input moving forward, because we do have a tight time frame now to hit the public hearing
Yeah.
date.
so perhaps we email any questions that you have that you'd like to see department-wide and particularly program-wide to city manager, and then you all can, and to Director Sobota and both of you, and just send them alone. It's fine. You don't have to email the entire council.
I'd appreciate that.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much for the work
Thank
you
you.
did on this.
Thank you.
Someone is really wonderful at presenting slides here. Good job. All right, we'll be meeting next door for the regular meeting in just a couple of minutes.